guys, so today let's learn together about gymnosperms. Before that, what is gymnosperms? Gymnosperm is a non-flowering plant. Next, I'll be talking about the characteristic of gymnosperm. There are 4 characteristics of gymnosperm. First and foremost, gymnosperm produces seeds that are totally exposed, which is called as naked seeds. What is meant by naked seeds? Naked seeds mean that the seeds are not enclosed in an ovary. Secondly, the reproductive structures of the gymnosperm is cones, or we call as strobili. Thirdly, the plants are include of ginkgo, fir, pine, and also spruce. The last one is gymnosperm is heterosporous, which is mean it produces 2 types of spore. Firstly, it is macrospores. Macrospores will develop into male gametophytes with enteridia. Secondly, megaspores. Megaspores will develop into female gametophytes with archegonia. Before that, what is meant by archegonia and also enteridia? Enteridia means the male sex organ that produces sperm, while archegonia means the female sex organ that produces an egg. Okay, next, let's learn about the classification of gymnosperm. First, we have phylum Coniferophyta. This is also known as conifer. Secondly, we have phylum Cycadophyta. Phylum Cycadophyta is unbranched and consists of cycad species. Thirdly, we have phylum Gnetophyta. Phylum Gnetophyta consists of Gnetum species. And lastly, we have phylum Ginkgophyta. Phylum Ginkgophyta consists of ginkgo species. Okay, now let's learn more about phylum Coniferophyta. Phylum Coniferophyta is commonly called as conifers, which consists of spruce, pines, and also firs. Next, the largest genus of conifers are pinus. Thirdly, most conifers are evergreen, which means they will retain their leaf in winter. Next, phylum Coniferophyta are woody trees and shrubs, which means they exhibit secondary growth to produce roots and also bark. The roots contain only tracheids and with no vessels, and it is long, tapering cell with pit, which will allow water and dissolved nutrient to move from one cell to another. And the bark is extremely thick, and it helps the plants to protect the tree trunks from forest fire. Next, we must know that conifers have these 2 important features, which is needle-like leaf and resin. Both of these things help the conifers to adapt with its environment. First, needle-like leaf. Needle-like leaf have a few characteristics, which is sunken stomata, thick cuticle, nasophyll conserve water, and it also helps the conifers to adapt to harsh environment, and it also known as passive smoothing. Secondly, the resin. The resin protect the trees from fungi or insects. Conifers are monoecious, which means they have separate male and female reproductive part in different locations but still in the same plant. Secondly, the reproductive part are generally born in the cones or strobili. Thirdly, the conifers are mostly heterosporous, which means it produces microspores and megaspores in separate groups. Okay, now let's take a look on the process on how the ovule was formed in female cone. So as we can see, each of the cone contain 2 ovules, which we call as megasporangia on its upper surface. Within each megasporangia, it have a megaspore sacs that undergo meiosis and form 4 haploid of megaspores. Only 1 megaspores that will develop into the female gametophytes with archegonia that containing an egg. Okay. After that, the ovule will ready to receive a pollen by by release a sticky droplet on its opening to help the pollen grain to land on it. Okay, now let's take a look at the process on how the pollen grains was formed. Okay, based on the slides, we can see that the milk will contain a microsporangia, and each of the microsporangia contain a microspore, which is a mother cell. The mother cell will undergo meiosis and form four microspores. Only one microspore will develop and form a pollen grain. Okay, the pollen grain will be carried by wind to the female queen. Okay, now I'll present to you guys about the phylum Cycadophyta. Phylum Cycadophyta is tropical and subtropical plant with stout, trunk-like stems and compound leaf that resemble fern and buds. The phylum Cycadophyta is also dioecious, which is mean the seeds cone are on the female plant while the pollen cone are on the male plants. It have a motile sperm cells, and each of it has many hair-like flagella, and pollen grains are carried by air or insects to the female plant, to the seed cone on the female plants. And during pollination, the pollen cones will form pollen tubes and release flagellated sperms that will swim to the egg. Okay, next we will learn more about phylum Gynophyta. First, phylum Gynophyta is also known as maiden hair tree. Secondly, phylum Gynophyta is dioecious. What is meant by dioecious? Dioecious means male and female reproductive organ are in separate individuals. Secondly, it has a fan-like leaf that turn blue and are deciduous during autumn, which means it will fall off during autumn. Lastly, it only represented by a single species, which is Ginkgo biloba. Okay, now let's take a look at the last types of Gymnosperm, which is phylum Gnetophyta. Okay, phylum Gnetophyta is also known as gnetophytes. Okay, it is a set-bearing plants that can grow as shrubs, trees, or also vines. There are three genera of the gnetophytes, which is Gnetum, Ephedra, and also Welwitschia. Each of the genera has their own distinctive morphology and architecture of the sporophytes. Okay, gnetophytes share numerous characters with the angiosperms. The leaf have the reticulate venation that resembles the leaf of dicot angiosperms. And the xylem contain both tracheids and vessel element. The reproductive structure, which is the cluster of cones, look like a flower. Okay, it will undergo a form of double fertilization that will produce two eggs. One egg is fertilized to form the embryo, and the other one does not complete the development and does not provide any nutrition to the developing embryo.
Assalamualaikum. So I will continue this chapter. I will explain about seed plants, which is angiosperm. For the learning outcomes, students can be able to describe the characteristic of angiosperms, state the classification of angiosperm into two classes, compare the characteristic of gymnosperm and angiosperm, and last one is compare the characteristic of monocot dicot plants. So before we start, what do you guys think about angiosperm? Actually, angiosperm are plants that produce flowers and bear their seeds in fruits. So there are three characteristics of angiosperm. The first one is complete vascular tissue, the second one is flower, and the third one is fruit. For the first one, complete vascular tissue, which is formed in xylem. You guys can see here, there's a lot. There is trachea, sieve plate, sieve tubes. So, complete vascular tissue is the most successful of plant group. There are filaments in vascular tissue, which is xylem, and xylem consists of trachea, vessel elements, and fiber cells. For tracheids, There is a long and template cells and also function in mechanical supports and water transport. For vessel elements, it's shorter and wider than tracheids, arranged into and continuous tubes as xylem vessel, and more efficient than trachea. For the last one is fiber cells, which is for support. For the second characteristic, which is flower, so this is picture of angiosperm. There's a flower and there's also an apple. So seems like human. Flowers also have a gender, which is male and female. But for flower, we call it stamens for male and pistil for female. At the right side, there's pistil. Pistil is for female. And for female parts, there's have stigma, ovary, and style. At the left side, there's stamen, and stamen is for male. And for male parts, there's have anther and filament. So, and also there, as you guys can see here, there's also have ovule and ovary. Ovules are always enclosed within the ovary, and here there's an apple and also a seed. The body of angiosperm is the sporophyte, while the gametophyte is confined to the flowers, usually male and female together. Flowers having both stamen and pistil, like I said before, there is gender. A monoecious plant has perfect flowers or has both female and male flowers on the same plant. Imperfect flowers have only one sex. The dioecious plant has imperfect flowers on separate female and male plants. In angiosperm, double fertilization occurs producing the nutritive triploid endosperm. For the last characteristic, which is fruits, there are three types of fruits, which is simple fruits, aggregate fruits, and multiple fruits. Simple fruits arise in one ovary in one flower. Aggregate fruits arise from several ovaries in one flower, and multiple fruits arise from ovaries in several tightly clustered flowers which grow together in one fruit. For the last part is differences between monocots and dicots. For monocots, there is one cotyledon, fibrous root, scattered vascular, parallel veins, and multiple of 3-4 flower. And for dicots, there's 2 cotyledon, taproot, ring vascular, branch veins, and 4 of 5 for flowers.
Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Okay, I'm going to continue with the last part of the chapter, which is evolutionary relationship in plant kingdom. So let's check it out. Okay, so for the learning outcome for this topic is students are able to explain the evolutionary relationship among groups in plant kingdom from bryophytes to angiosperm based on its 6 categories. The first one is its size, and the second one is dominance to gametophytes and sporophytes, and the third one is its dependence to gametophytes and sporophytes, and the fourth one is water dependence in its fertilization, and the second last one is the presence and complexity of vascular tissues, and the last one is embryo protection. Okay, so let's see the first 2 characteristics of plants. Okay, so the first characteristic is size. The bryophytes obviously has the smallest size compared to the other groups. And the second group, pteridophytes, we call it medium. Why is that we call it medium? It is because it is larger than bryophytes, but it is still smaller than gymnosperm and angiosperm. And for gymnosperm and angiosperm, is the largest compared to the other 2 groups. Okay, so for the second characteristic is dominance of gametophytes and sporophytes. So for bryophytes, gametophytes part is more dominant compared to the sporophyte. It is because the gametophytes part is much more larger than the sporophytes parts, and the gametophyte parts also long-lived compared to the sporophytes parts. Okay, it is different case for pteridophytes, gymnosperm and angiosperm. For them, the sporophytes is more dominant compared to the gametophytes parts, because the sporophytes parts is much more larger and long-lived compared to the gametophytes parts. Okay, moving on to the next two characteristics of plant groups. Okay, so for the third characteristic is dependence of gametophytes and sporophytes. Okay, so for the first plant group, Bryophytes, sporophytes depends on the gametophytes for the rest of its life. It is because the sporophytes parts cannot carry out photosynthesis. Meanwhile, the gametophytes parts can carry out photosynthesis. For the second plant group, Pteridophytes, sporophytes depends on the gametophyte at the early development. It is because the sporophyte parts is still small and the gametophytes part is needed for nutrition. And for Gymnosperm and Angiosperm, the sporophytes is totally independent. It is because the sporophytes can carry out photosynthesis on its own. Okay, for the fourth characteristic is water dependence in fertilization. For Bryophytes and Pteridophytes, the water is needed for their fertilization. It is because in Bryophytes, the flagellated sperm needed water to swim to the archegonia, which is the female gamete, and for Pteridophyte, the water is needed for the flagellated sperm swim to the egg cell. It is different for Gymnosperm and Angiosperm. It is because the Gymnosperm and Angiosperm already can produce seed, so the water is not needed for their fertilization. Okay, moving on to the last two characteristics of plant group. Okay, so for the fifth characteristic is the presence of vascular tissue. The Bryophyte, they have no vascular tissue, but they have rhizoid, and some of them also have specialized conductive tissue to transport water and organic compound. And for the Pteridophyte, they only have simple vascular tissue. It is because the vascular tissue is not well developed that makes them the non-complex vascular tissue. And for Gymnosperm, they have xylem and phloem in the vascular tissue, but the xylem only have trachea with no vessel, and the phloem have sieve tube with no companion cell. And for the last plant group, the Angiosperm, since it is the most successful of plant group, the xylem contain trachea and vessel, and phloem have sieve tube and companion cell, which makes them the most complete and complex vascular tissue among other plant group. And for the last characteristic is the embryo protection. The Bryophyte and Pteridophyte is not protected at all. It is because they have no seed. But for the Gymnosperm and Angiosperm, it is protected by the seed.